Hello and welcome to another very special episode of the Sales Ops Demystified podcast. Today, we're joined by Kenny Hsu, who is the VP of Revenue Operations at AuditBoard. I am extremely excited about this discussion. Kenny, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So I actually want to kick off the interview in a slightly different way. I want to kick it off with a LinkedIn post that is listed on your profile, Kenny. It's about the concept of reps making quota. And so I'm not going to share the post because I think it'd be great if you could just share with the audience your point of view with this LinkedIn post.
Yeah, one of the questions or topics that come up the most among sales operations, revenue operations, frankly, CROs, CEOs, VCs, is what percentage of your reps hit quota? And I've always found it to be an interesting discussion because inevitably there is a number that gets thrown out, whether it be 50%, 60%, 70%. But then there is zero context around the number itself. Right. And so what gets told to sales teams and sales leadership teams are 50 to 70% of your reps should be making your number. That is the best practice. But yet, when I talk to folks in the industry, my friends, and I look around, I was like, who are these people that are hitting 50, 70%? And inevitably, there are a few people who are like, oh, yeah, there's somebody over there that's making it. And then I'd go call that person. They were like, well, yeah, if you kind of tilt your head this way, squint in one eye, and ignore all these other outliers, yeah, we're 50 to 70%. And it's all great and fine. But to me, it actually is the wrong question because, of course, if you're thinking about what percentage of your reps quota, if you want to improve that number, the easiest thing for you to do is just drop your quotas, right? And with that, and not doing anything else, you could have 100 more than, or not more, but you could have 100% of your reps hit quotas if you want. So, not that I'm going to presume to say that there's the perfect answer out there. But I do find the discussion oftentimes lacking in context, and so therefore we actually lack the substantive points that we need to talk about, which is at the end of the day, for those of us in operations, for those of us in sales leadership, it is how do we help our teammates become more productive.
And this leads really nicely into my next question, the difference between operations and leadership within sales, because according from my research, it seems like you actually moved into like a formal ops role in around 2018.
Yes.
So there's been an extensive career beforehand in sales leadership.
Yes.
I want to ask why at that point did you feel like it was the time to take on a formal ops role?
It's a great question. By 2018, I've been in enterprise SaaS for about 3 to 4 years. Have gone through 2 transactions, an IPO and an acquisition, and in different roles. But my experience taught me 2 main things. One was that especially once a company has reached product market fit, like that is undeniable, the thing that separates good companies and great companies is go to market. So that's number one. Number 2 is it turns out I actually really like go to market. And so whatever role I had, whether it be a GM of a vertical, whether it be in finance or, I was the CFO of a company that got acquired, I always inevitably spend most of my time on go-to-market issues, and so it was actually it's a great question because it was a lot through a lot of self-reflection and talking to mentors of mine. I was offered like, hey, maybe you can go be the CFO of another small company. That would be one bet, but the bet I wanted to make was, hey, if I spent 100% of my time in a go-to-market role, doing nothing all day, but thinking about, talking about, and then executing on go-to-market issues. That everything else will take care of itself, and I would have a lot of fun. And knock on wood, so far it's been the right move for me personally.
I'm sensing some strong self-awareness here, Kenny. The other thing as well is that surely your relationship with the finance team at AuditBoard is probably on point because you know exactly what they want to see, how they work, etc.
Everywhere I've been, actually, it's been one of the key relationships, operations and finance, and I would actually put HR in that boat as well. And as I like to say to all of my teammates, if you put kind of ops, HR, and finance together, and you think about the things that each of those groups are responsible for and would work together on, like one group can't go too far ahead of the other groups without talking to them, without being completely in sync, right? Just as a very simple example, if HR is doing performance review, like immediately ops needs to be there to provide the data, help set up the program, right? And ops probably also have a lot of context around the performance, and then, whenever you're done with financial, with performance reviews, the finance team's always right there with, the financial implications of all of the discussions and various decisions that you would make. So, in fact, we at AuditBoard, and I've been doing this almost at every company I've been at, we have a weekly team meeting with our revenue operations group. And operations and finance are a part of it. They're invited every week, and actually most weeks they show up because they find value in just hearing what's going on within sales, and also, communicating with the rest of the team just what else that they're working on that would have an implication for the operations group and for the sales team.
Got it. And again, this ties in nicely to my next question. The role that you're currently in is VP of RevOps. The previous sales ops role was in a sales ops function, I believe. When you joined AuditBoard, was the RevOps function set up, or is that something that you have formed or combined since you joined?
So we're still at the beginning stages of the journey here at AuditBoard. But that is for sure the vision, and I always say to people, look, you can call me whatever you want, you can put whatever title in front of me. That's okay. That's just kind of words on a page. But at the end of the day, just like between operations, finance, and HR, the same could be said about your go-to-market teams, right? Sales, marketing, and customer success. None of them can get too far without the other. Another perfect example would be segmentation. If each one of those teams have their own segmentation, like you're not exactly aligned. And so whether it's RevOps or it's Sales Ops, I've always found myself, working with members of the different go-to-market teams coming together. But I do see this as a very useful trend to have the operations team of those groups coming together. I think the question for all of us in this RevOps evolution, if you will, is how are we going to do it? Because I do think there are, I see people doing different things, and I am, genuinely curious which one's going to work out better.
Sure. Because it's been about 3 months at AuditBoard, what would you say has been your biggest focus so far?
So our company, I feel like the luckiest person in the world because I've joined a company that's doing extremely, extremely well. The founders and the management team have created a product that is in heavy, heavy demand. So I am. So everything else that I work on just seems like a dream and a pleasure because we're working on demand. We're trying to figure out what is the most optimal way to sort through the demand. We're making sure that whenever we do get the chance and the privilege to get to a late stage conversation, that we are protecting the value that we are providing to our customers and would-be customers, and making sure kind of AuditBoard gets the right fair share of it through pricing and other discussions. And there's a lot of also, good old operations build, making sure that within Salesforce, our forecast categories are set up, our stages are going to be set up. So we're at a stage where we're, call it close, somewhere between 60, 75, 70, $80 million in revenue. Clear momentum, clear signs that we're going to be breaking through 100 in no time and beyond. We're using, I myself am using kind of that air cover of tremendous business success as air cover to just get some of the foundational things in place, so that as we scale, we're scaling it in a repeatable way.
So much wisdom in the answer. There's like three things that I think I really liked. First, you were saying that you're like sorting through the demand, which I think maybe that's not wisdom. That's just an incredibly awesome place to be in. The second was about how you are trying to make the pricing right. So the value that you guys create, you capture a fair amount of that, which I think is awesome. And then the final thing you said just then that I can't quite remember, but that was an awesome answer, Kenny. Like really, really deep insights to that question. The final part was you using this growth as almost like air cover to get the ops foundations. That makes total sense.
We're doing forecasting, making sure that our forecast is right. But if the business is going well, you spend less time worrying about how are we going to be doing this quarter, but you spend more time thinking about what do we need to build now so that we can continue to have this success and momentum going forward. It's a great place to be.
Roughly, how many, just quickly for the audience's benefit, roughly how many reps and how many people in the RevOps team at the moment?
Yeah, so we're growing very rapidly. I can give you some rough ranges of numbers. We're probably going to close out the year close to 40 reps and growing. And not just in the U.S. and Canada, by the way. It's going to be inevitable that we will have international expansion beyond soon as well. On the RevOps side, that is also in flux. And currently we have 4 members on the team, wonderful members on the team, and I suspect that number will grow. I think the interesting discussion now internally is, do we invest ahead a little bit on the operation side to get the foundations in place ahead of all these wonderful and soon to be very productive reps start to join us. So that's the discussion we're having internally right now. And I think the answer is going to be, yeah, we'll invest ahead.
Amazing. And final question from me, who in the world of sales or RevOps would you most like to take for lunch?
I never met him, but I've met folks that have worked with him for a very long time, and so indirectly he's had a huge impact on my career and my passion for go-to-market. But John McMahon from PTC and a whole bunch of different companies, I'm sure you've heard of him. I'd love to sit down with him for lunch, and he recently wrote a book called The Qualified Sales Leader, which I'm almost done with. And it's been it honestly feels like coming home. Reading through, it's like, yes, this is the way the world should be. This is the end state we'd like to get our sales team to be at, and so that would be a fun lunch for me.
So actually, I haven't heard of him, so we will maybe try and get John on the show. That's amazing. Excellent. Kenny, I'm going to hand over to my wonderful co-host now, who's going to ask some more sales/RevOps specific questions. Alex, welcome.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Kenny. That was really, really interesting. I think I was scribbling notes too fast to type up what I actually wanted to ask as questions. So it might not be as it might not flow quite as well as Tom's questions, but there were certainly a number of areas really interested to dive in and get a bit more detail. So no particular order, but one of the things that really I think stood out, was quite interesting to me, was getting, and Tom highlighted as well, was getting the pricing right. So again, so you capture the value that you're creating as a business. Now, obviously that's counted against, as you almost talked about at the start, about quota, and I need to hit quota, and if you only give me another percentage to take off that, you might get this deal across the line, and those inevitable pressures, to reduce the price to close the deal. I just wondered if you had any tips from your experience of really trying to help guide the reps into getting the right value.
I think pricing needs to match a lot of things. I think pricing needs to match the evolution of your company and what you're trying to do from a strategy standpoint. If you were a smaller startup and you're trying to grow, and there are incumbents in the marketplace, which is where AuditBoard was for a while, I think you use pricing as a weapon to be scrappy, to change the world. In fact, that's exactly what AuditBoard did well before my time. They came in with an innovative pricing structure that caught a lot of people's attention, alleviated pains folks had with existing solutions out there, and through that genius move, probably helped with our growth rate a few points. And as if you're on the other end of the spectrum, if you're pretty well established, if you're a clear leader, and if it's fairly easy for your company to distinguish yourself from the rest of the competitors, therefore you're not as much of a commodity play, I do think there is room for you to then say, hey, we deserve, look at all this value we're delivering. We deserve to have a bigger slice of the pie. Now, how you go about doing it is there's some science to it, but I would argue it's an art unto itself. And I think my biggest learning has been that if that two ends of the spectrum happens to describe your company's evolution over time, where you started out as a scrappy startup, trying to take on the world, and now all of a sudden you're finding yourself in the top right quadrant of whatever analyst reports and G2 reviews are out there. I think getting the strategy right, getting the structure right, that's maybe 20% of the challenge. The other 80% is going to come right down to execution. When your rep is sitting across from the buyer, and they've established value, they have more or less won the deal. It's now just down to negotiation. How does he or she have that conversation? Do they talk about pricing in a confident way, or do they kind of rely and fall back on some of the behavior that admittedly has gotten the company to this point, right? So those are not necessarily poor behavior, but for the company to continue to grow and achieve full scale, you may need to put the training and the coaching in place to make sure that people go into those conversations with the right mindset and the right level of confidence.
Thanks. That was really helpful. Yeah. A lot of good insight there on tying the strategy, your pricing strategy to where you are as a business, and also a really good way of seeing it in terms of the reps' performance. Well, not in that area, it's going to be based heavily on what we've been doing in the past, and therefore the emphasis on training rather than feeling that it's a failing.
Yeah.
Amazing. That was really helpful. The other thing that I also thought was quite interesting, I don't think we've talked about before, was in terms of growing a team, which we have talked about, but you put it nicely as a question: do we invest ahead? And I imagine if you're sitting in the ops world, you're always going to want to say yes to that answer, and therefore the sales manager is probably going to want to invest in his team. So how do you, or her team, of course, how do you think you could best put forward that case for the invest ahead? And when should you? Because again, sometimes probably you shouldn't. So how would you give some advice around that?
I think it's an interesting question, because I know this is a big thing for for all of us who are in the operations world. I will say the first thing that the first part of my answer actually doesn't directly address your question, but I think it's critically important, which is that you've got to pick the right business partner. In my case, it was the CRO, and Tom Schmidt is our CRO here at AuditBoard, and Scott Arnold, our CEO as well, right? Like, believe me, I had as I was deciding to come to AuditBoard, I had lots of conversations with them. Nothing like I didn't do the, hey, I'm not going to come unless you approve this budget type of thing. But it was more like, hey, help me understand why this role is important to you. Why are you reaching out to me? And I was one of Tom's early hires, and so help me understand why that is a priority for you. So really kind of get them talking, almost get them to commit to you that like, no, operations is important, right? So that's the first part. The second part is then I feel like you have to kind of prove it, prove the reason why you need to invest ahead, and that's through two things. One is first of all, just doing good work and making a quick impact. Whether you just started your job or you've been at your job for a while. Like, I used to work for a CFO who says, "Hey, we have zero budget for expenses." It's like, what are you talking about? Like, we spend money everywhere. It's like, no, we have $0 budget for expenses. But we have an unlimited amount of budget for investments. And I think the point he was really making is every company, every CFO, every CEO, every CRO wants to know that every dollar that they're investing in is generating a multiple return. And so you gotta show that by proving it through the work that you're doing day to day with your team. And then secondly, by painting a picture of like, hey, here's where we're going. Here are all the things that need to fall into place before we can get there, before all these reps can show up, and we can make sure that they're successful. And then when you then look at the book of work, when you look at the roadmap, you then say, yeah, okay, do we have the right team? Like, yes, this is what we need to do. And then you say, hey, do we have either the right team or the right size team to go and make that happen? And I think, when I've had the conversation that way, it's been really productive and honestly really fun to do. When things get a little late, it wasn't budgeted, but people are drowning, and you're like, hey, we really need one or two more people. Look, like there are times the company will come through, right? But I find that is a harder conversation to have than the one up ahead where it's planful, it's purposeful, it's done with a vision in mind.
Yeah, no, I think that's really, really helpful. And the idea, laying out the path so that if you did start to become underwhelmed because your recommendations haven't been taken to board, it's clear that previous conversation was right and that the course correction rather than things are slipping. And I think that's really helpful, and just really, I guess, good advice for the other thing you were talking about, which is sort of managing different teams, whether that's across the go-to-market teams or, as you said, around operations with finance and HR, or really any business, just making clear what you're adding and your plan and why you're asking for what you are and putting that forward. Last thing to say, and you may have to make up the question off the back of it, but I really like what you just said. The title is just words on a page. And we have a fair bit of discussion on the show about sort of revenue ops and sales ops and differences and other bits. But I just thought that was a really helpful thing to say, that actually whatever your title, whatever the teams that report into you or whoever you report into, you're obviously part of a bigger play, and you can work collaboratively with people outside of a formal structure. And that to me just seemed a really good way of doing that. And I just wondered if you had, given that was your observation, any sort of suggestions around how you've sort of actualized that in your career? Yeah,
I've got two things. One is, listen, I'm willing to bet for all of your listeners out there, I'm willing to bet that whatever job you have, right, whether you're in sales ops or marketing ops or CS ops or somewhere in between, if you got a group of people together, that's across the go-to-market to talk through important topics, to work together to achieve something, I am willing to bet that nobody's going to stop you. Right. And so my encouragement to everybody is just start doing it. Right. If you see a need, just get people together. Don't worry about organizational lines too much. And just getting together and solving problems. And over time, it will become inevitable that people will see, hey, that is like we really need all three arms of the go-to-market engine to be working together, or all three components of the go-to-market engine to be working together. And I think operations can really lead the way. On the flip side, for those who are like making the journey, I do have a word of caution, which is, just cobbling a marketing ops team, a sales ops team, and a CS ops team together under one leader does not a revenue operations team make. And so, and I don't, and if that happens to be your situation, that this is not a criticism of sort of, I know many of you probably got put into that situation, but I think my encouragement and honestly a challenge to all of us in this field is to figure out what is the right mix of like, okay, there should be one group of people taking care of data, system, and tools across all across the entirety of go-to-market, and that actually should be a sub-team. And I would argue that the more of these types of functions that we can put together that spans across, I think the more value revenue operations is going to provide. Because again, if you're just putting groups of people who weren't reporting to one person together under one person, I would argue that all you've created is a bureaucratic layer. And again, it's fine if you find yourself in that situation, but then I think it is then incumbent upon you to figure out, okay, how do I make the best of this, and actually don't have the silo be operated or manifested through the team structure that you currently have.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Amazing, Kenny. So many insights in such a short time. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your wisdom with the audience.
Yeah, you bet. Thank you for having me.